Before a blacksmith could sharpen a blade, or a carpenter could hone a chisel, they needed one thing: the grindstone. It was the tool that sharpened history. But how do you take a jagged, immovable piece of the earth and turn it into a perfectly balanced spinning wheel? Today, we descend into the quarry to witness the brute force and delicate skill required to carve solid rock into industry's most essential tool. In the red sandstone area of the southwest Eifel, Neidenbach was considered the center of the grindstone cutting trade. Around 1900, when the village on the heights between the Kill and Nims rivers counted barely 700 inhabitants, up to 500 quarrymen worked here in the sandstone pits. 100 years before this time, there were only 18 landed estates in Neidenbach. The massive rural farm complexes still define the townscape today. Masonry, window and door jambs, the borders of manure pits, and the paving are made of sandstone. The easily workable, vivid red material has always been used by stone carvers for wayside shrines, architectural tracery, and figurative works. The great era of the stone-cutting trade, from which the many characteristic stonecutter houses originate, began in 1873 with the opening of the Trier-Cologne railway line. At the Kilberg, Densborn, and St. Thomas stations in the Kill Valley, several wagons of grindstones were loaded daily in the best years. In the district of Neidenbach, more than 40 abandoned and overgrown quarries testify to the former importance of the trade. At the time of this filming, there was only one last business left here that produced grindstones in the traditional way. The spoil heap on the slope and the brake shack on the cart path next to it are visible from afar. From here, the quarry path leads in a straight, slightly ascending line up to the stone pit. They form the boundaries of the stone blocks and facilitate detachment from the rock face. That is why one tries to detect the fissures with dowsing rods before clearing begins. When the exposed rock is marked out, the curves are hewn for the stones in the upper layer. This is the task of the two hewers. They dig trenches around the edges of the planned grindstones, which are hewn out about a foot deep. The rock between the curves is considered waste. It is utilized for building stones. In addition, smaller grindstones up to a diameter of 1 meter are made from it, which go to glass and gemstone grinding shops, and nowadays more rarely to farms and village smithies. The large grindstones, measuring up to 3 meters, formerly went by the hundreds to the grinding cottages of the Bergisches Land. These are the traces of vertically drilled boreholes and black powder resulting from splitting blasts. To facilitate the work, a whole rock bench has been pushed off the bedrock by blasting. Due to the distance from the wall, the stone curve at the back can be reached comfortably without having to dig a trench there. At the front, a corner has been cut out by the trench, which is to be wedged off. The iron wedges are placed a hand's width apart into the vertically deepened groove, which has been doused with water and swept clean. They are brought under tension with light blows and then driven in. When the crack has gone through, the broken out corner can be thrown off with the crowbar. Pieces of rock of this size usually do not remain unused. After these preparations, the hewers can completely free the semi-hewn round block. The difference in height makes it clear that a grindstone has already been extracted in the upper part of this bench. The bedrock here offers a good 3 layers, totaling 3 meters. The hewers who do the preparatory work for the grindstone cutters form a team together with them. Their task is to expose the round blocks to such an extent that they can be finished by the grindstone cutters. For this, the trench must be hewn out 65 to 70 centimeters deep. To remove the small debris or rubble in the open areas, a light pickaxe is used.
Formerly, rheumatism was considered an occupational disease for the stone hewers, often transmitted to the clearers as well. Silicosis, or stone dust lung, is also considered an occupational disease. The trenching hammers soon lose their sharpness. That is why the hammers are attached to the handles in such a way that they can be easily exchanged. The white beechwood handle, smoothed by the hand sliding back and forth, must be roughened often. A piece of sandstone is used for this. The wear and tear of iron impact tools in the sandstone quarries is very high. Each of the 2 hewers needs 8 to 12 trenching hammers daily. They must be sharpened and hardened in the smithies belonging to each quarry. In the large operations of earlier times, dedicated quarry smiths were employed. The smaller ones were served by smiths who went around daily in turns. Here, in the last Neidenbach Sandstone Quarry, the smithing work is carried out by the owner of the business, the quarry master himself. When no professional smiths could be found for the declining trade after 1960, he familiarized himself with the skills. The small workshop on the quarry path is equipped with all necessary tools. Since the leather of the bellows became brittle, a centrifugal blower fans the forge. When the tip of the trenching hammer is red hot, the iron on the four edges that taper to the narrow cutting edge is driven forward on the anvil. Cutting edges drawn out too thin are unusable for stoneworking. They are therefore upset or staved. 2 heats are needed for each tip. In the second heat, the sharpness is reworked and brought into the final shape. This is followed by hardening.
After a short immersion in the hardening bath, the iron turns blue up to the tip. Only then is it completely submerged in the tub for cooling. The other stone hewing tools are prepared in the same way. Here, the teeth of the so-called wolf, which are wedged into an iron shaft. The tool is used for the fine processing of stone surfaces. For major smithing jobs, such as lengthening worn-out trenching hammers or welding in steel inserts, there is no time during the quarry season. They are carried out in winter when the operation is at rest. In the lowest layer of the rock bench, the rounding of a stone has meanwhile been completely exposed. Above are the newly marked out round blocks. In the middle, the 2 hewers are in the process of deepening the trench further. Below, on the excavated stone at the quarry floor, the grindstone hewers are now getting to work. They are also referred to as finishers. They also always work in pairs. Their task is first to separate the round block, which has been exposed all around, at the underside. For this purpose, the wedge groove is hewn with the pick, which has a vertical cutting edge. This is a groove at the foot of the stone curve just above the bedrock. After that, the wedge groove is driven in about 6 centimeters deep with the trenching hammer. If smaller blocks, like this corner in the middle of the bench, are to be separated, one can do without a wedge groove. Here, individual wedge holes are sufficient, which are roughly hewn in a single line. By driving in the 6 wedges evenly, the rock cracks through smoothly.
the loosened block has been thrown off, the second round block on the bench lies almost free. For the stone at the quarry floor, the wedge groove is almost finished. Finally, it is carefully drawn out in the plane of the underlying rock with the cutting edge of the pick.
In the tapered groove, the 12 centimeter long and 4 centimeter wide wedges must find a firm seat. The wedge surfaces, which are crucial when lifting off the heavy round block, must be cleaned of any adhering stone residue. To rule out any horizontal pressure effects, the cutting edges of the wedges are left blunt. To loosen and lift off the exposed stone, 3/4 of its circumference is densely set with wedges. Depending on the size of the round block, this amounts to 42 to 48 pieces. The rear side against the rock wall usually remains free. When, by counting, the center of the arc set with wedges has been determined and marked, the two grindstone hewers begin driving them in at this point. One goes around to the left and the other to the right. The stone hewer with the most experience has climbed onto the back of the stone to intervene and guide the process if it becomes necessary. He feels it in his feet, how the wedge crack pulls. With light driving blows, the wedges are first brought under tension. They must not be struck more forcefully on one side than on the other. During the multiple repeated rounds, the force of the blows is gradually increased, starting at the front where the tension must begin. The booming sound indicates that the stone has now detached from the bedrock.
Danny.
How you know? It's made my hat and all.
Now the 2.35 meter long and 70-pound heavy lifting bars can be used. With the wedge-shaped claws, the stone is levered out of its bed, while handleless trenching hammerheads are shoved underneath. Using the heavy lifting devices, the round block is cranked up high enough so that larger wooden blocks can be shoved underneath. One can see that the wedges did not separate the stone smoothly.
It has a massive belly on the underside. The stone jacks, which can handle a good 100 hundredweight, approximately 5 tons, with their triple gear ratio, are oiled before the new use. Subsequently, the rear side of the stone is lifted while attempting to push it away from the wall. The traditional products of the stone hewers, which can still be found in many Eiffel houses today, include sinks, wash tubs, sauerkraut containers, and livestock troughs. They were formerly distributed far and wide by traveling merchants from Niederkyle. Since the shift to grindstone production in Neidenbach, such containers are made from waste blocks. Today, they are often found planted with flowers in front gardens. A site coop is to be made from the separated piece. That is a pig trough, which was formerly used for feeding pigs. When the so-called compass is brought in, the work on the stone surfaces for the grindstone hewers on the lifted and positioned raw block begins. With the help of the round stone disc and the straight edge, the top side is first measured with the compass and sighted. Taking the unevenness into account, the most favorable surface cut is determined, which by no means needs to be horizontal. Since the surface has to be removed and leveled down to the lowest point, the measurement is taken here with the pointer, which must point into the solid material at all other places. If it turns out that a sufficiently large overhang remains at the higher points, the compass is readjusted in the center by shifting the 3 wedges placed underneath. When sighting the stone, it's important to choose the surface cut so that as little rock as possible has to be removed.
Finally, the stone is written off by marking the determined surface line on the edge. Since there is no standing room in front of the stone, a platform is laid here with heavy wooden beams. From the marked top edge, one can determine whether the round block maintains the required thickness. It is important that the round block is accessible from all sides for further processing. Then, the surface is chummed, or roughly brought in from the outside towards the center. The depressions in the rough surface, which are used for alignment during rough hewing, are referred to as bower, peasant, or builder, likely a specific technical term in this context. By placing blow after blow with the trenching hammers, the stone protruding in bosses or humps can be broken out in flat layers. The stone hewer occupied with the pig trough uses the 2-point pick to roughly hew the wall. The sides prepared this way must subsequently be reworked with the wolf tool. For the lengthy rough hewing of the grindstone blank, the stone hewers need a good 1.5 days under unfavorable conditions.
Since pneumatic hammers have been in use, the time required has decreased considerably. The green, that is, the freshly broken and moist stone, is easiest to work. Once it is separated from the rock, it soon becomes hard and brittle. Therefore, one tries to finish hewing the stones immediately after wedging them loose. Since the mid-60s, smaller grindstones up to 1 meter have been machined in Neidenbach on a stone saw and in a grindstone turning shop. Therefore, it suffices if they are roughly hewn. This small stone quarry with the 2 hewers, the 2 grindstone hewers and the helper is characteristic of the time after 1930, when the many family businesses emerged in Neidenbach. In the time before, the trade was dominated by half a dozen large operations, some of which employed more than 100 stone hewers.
The entrepreneurs who had come from Kilburg, Königswinter, and especially from Zollingen and Remscheid towards the end of the previous century were also involved in the grindstone trade. In their large-scale quarries equipped with field railway tracks, earth winches, and pit smithies, dozens of small production communities like this one worked side by side on the rock. The oldest quarries were located down in the Kill Valley. When the Bergisch small iron industry needed soft, fine-grained grindstones for surface grinding of areas, for example on saws, the suitable material was found in the higher elevations of Neidenbach. With the rearmament of the Navy before the First World War, the demand for grindstones rose abruptly. Thousands of so-called Krupp stones went to the Ruhr area for grinding armor plates. With the lost war, the economic boom in Neidenbach suddenly came to an end. When no more business could be done with grindstones in the 20s, the large companies withdrew without exception. As the demand in the tool smithies of the Bergisches land gradually grew again, family businesses took their place. Around 1935, however, the new upswing was severely impaired by the health regulations of the professional associations. Neidenbach sandstones were replaced by artificial emery stones and finally by grinding machines. Individual grinding shops in the Bergisches land, which until recently still had special permits for grinding gang saws, are the customers for these grindstones. From rough hewing from the rock to the completion of a large grindstone, one calculates 4 to 5 days. This is the start of work on the morning of the 3rd day, on which the hewn grindstone is half finished. The small round blocks at the edge of the quarry are prepared for the grindstone turning shop. Further ones are to be made from the split block. A second large stone has already been exposed on the rock bench to such an extent that wedging can begin soon. On the stone at the quarry floor, the leveled topside is now to be completely finished. By squaring off at the edge, the measurement is obtained by which the stone edge must be drawn in at the individual points.
Where the deviation is greatest, the radius for the circle is taken and the circumference is determined more precisely. The result is a stone diameter of 2.75 meters. While one stone hewer marks the circular line with the marking iron, the other begins to point the rounded edge, known as the track, squarely. The large grindstones, which could not exceed 3.04 meters due to the railway gauge, must be worked with the utmost precision. On the grinding benches, they reach a rotational speed of 14 to 18 meters per second, so that imbalance and uneven weight distribution would be strongly noticeable. When the wolf teeth are freshly sharpened in the smithy, they are first rubbed down on the rough stone. During the fine finishing with the wolf tool, the coarse work marks disappear. The depressions in the rough surface, which are used for alignment during rough hewing, are referred to as bower, peasant, or builder, likely a specific technical term in this context. By placing blow after blow with the trenching hammers, the stone protruding in bosses or humps can be broken out in flat layers. For the lengthy rough hewing of the grindstone blank, the stone hewers need a good 1.5 days under unfavorable conditions.
Since pneumatic hammers have been in use, the time required has decreased considerably. The green, that is, the freshly broken and moist stone, is easiest to work. Once it is separated from the rock, it soon becomes hard and brittle. Therefore, one tries to finish hewing the stones immediately after wedging them loose. The last blow, whose traces remain on the stone, is executed with the wolf tool. In the past, one tried to avert silicosis, from which many old stone hewers suffer, in 3 ways. The stone hewers accustomed themselves to breathing through the mouth by avoiding speaking while working on the stone.
They grew a mustache, which was supposed to catch the stone dust in front of the nose, and they drank schnapps as a preventative measure, believing that the airways could be kept free of dust this way. Before the work on the first bearing is finished, preparations are made for turning the stone. One of the stone hewers points the track, which was laid out as a rim, halfway down. Another one prepares the blocks that are supposed to catch the overturning stone. The platform, which is no longer needed, is removed. The hole for the grinding axle is created in the center of the stone and deepened to the middle. And to avoid damage, for example during transport, charms are made on the stone, which is what breaking the edges with the wolf tool is called. At the foot of the half-finished round block, which is being erected with stone jacks, the 2 turning timbers are positioned. They prevent damage from the rocky ground. Intermediate padding made of old smocks and sacks protects the stone edges. To secure against falling back, blocks have been placed under the stone at the back, which are constantly pushed forward. In the direction of the fall, the so-called bow, or structure or pile, is erected, which catches the overturning stone. The height of the piled-up stone chunks and rubble is calculated so that the upper ones are crushed upon impact. When the lifting jack no longer grips, the rope winch is used, which stands on the opposite edge of the quarry. After turning, one can see how deep the lifting wedges have torn the stone from the bench, because of the large depression in the rock. Where the deviation is greatest, the radius for the circle is taken, and the circumference is determined more precisely. The result is a stone diameter of 2.75 meters. While one stone hewer marks the circular line with the marking iron, the other begins to point the rounded edge, known as the track, squarely. The large grindstones, which could not exceed 3.04 meters due to the railway gauge, must be worked with the utmost precision. On the grinding benches, they reach a rotational speed of 14 to 18 meters per second, so that imbalance and uneven weight distribution would be strongly noticeable. When the wolf teeth are freshly sharpened in the smithy, they are first rubbed down on the rough stone. During the fine finishing with the wolf tool, the coarse work marks disappear. The last blow, whose traces remain on the stone, is executed with the wolf tool. In the past, one tried to avert silicosis, from which many old stone hewers suffer, in 3 ways. The stone hewers accustomed themselves to breathing through the mouth by avoiding speaking while working on the stone. The most impressive part of this wasn't the heavy lifting, it was the geometry. Tracing a perfect circle is hard enough on paper. Carving one out of uneven rock by eye is a master skill. I'm curious, do any of you have an old pedal-powered grindstone tucked away in a barn or shed? Does it still work? Tell me about the oldest tool you own in the comments. If you enjoyed this look, watch this next video and subscribe to the Archival Craft channel.